I'd never heard of Chivalry before, let alone a sequel, but Gamepass did its best little advertising spiel recently and pushed this in my direction. It was all over the front page of me Gamepass homepage, so I watched the trailer, saw it was some sort of medieval hack and slash online multiplayer game, and thought, well, let's give this a little go, shall we, see what it's all about. And so I installed it, clicked play, did the tutorial, which I'm not going to lie right now, took me blooming ages as I couldn't quite get the riposte and counter multiple people timing down. I did it eventually. I got there in the end. Seeing me do it would have been very memeable, like that saft journalist failing the Cuphead tutorial, no doubt. But I chose my team, the Mason Order, because they were red and red's my favourite colour. Then off I went into the game. I clicked on the 64-player Warzone experience, wandered around a bit, not knowing what I was doing or where I was supposed to be going. Then I ended up doing the thing I see people do while they're on the road, and when it's closed and people divert down it, I just followed whomever was in front of me, come across people in blue and started randomly pressing the slash button at them, hitting one person once, mostly hitting my teammates, before my bloke's head was suddenly lobbed off by some geezer wearing a kilt's longsword. Oh, okay, that was a bit naff, wasn't it? Let's try it again, shall we? Properly this time, I thought, as I was soon respawning back into the fray, and so I rushed blindly down the streets once more towards the bridge, and once again just started spinning my sword around randomly at anyone in blue or red's direction. The red ones I hit were accidents, of course, but my slashing this time managed to lob someone's arm off. "Oh, my arm!" he shouted before getting whacked over the head by a poleaxe in an overhead thrust, hitting the ground dead and having people trample all over his body whilst looking at the carnage. I was set on fire by a firebomb and burned alive before being bashed in the back and killed by a mace. Oh, okay, I thought again as I respawned. This time I decided not to charge so blindly at the bridge. It was becoming a massive epicenter of death by this point. Both sides were randomly just charging in blindly, hacking and slashing away at each other. Heads, arms, firebombs, arrows, even giant Dane axes were being thrown into people's heads. It was all kicking off, and I got to experience the chaos from the back for a few seconds before charging randomly into the fight once again. This time, killing 2 people before I died as I was testing out their overhead smash of the poleaxe. I respawned again and used the double tap of the X on the Xbox controller, which means you do a battle cry, and suddenly everyone I respawned with did it too. It felt great charging into battle with a small pack of axe-wielding nutters just hacking and slashing at the enemy, hoping to get a kill before eventually dying, something I became so engrossed in doing time and time again that I didn't even realise there was a time limit and objective in the middle of the screen. An objective we failed, and one that meant the blue team Agatha won. Suddenly, my bloke dropped his sword and got cut in half by a great axe, and it gave me time to sit back and ponder what had just happened, as for the first time in a very long bloody while, something strange occurred whilst playing a multiplayer game. I was actually excited to go again. I felt something I hadn't experienced in an age. I actually had fun. And fun is what I feel this game excels at. I've been playing about 3 games a night now for the past 2 weeks. I still don't know what I'm doing all that much. I don't die straight away now, and I do get a few kills during matches, meaning I finish top half of the table on a regular basis. Sometimes I'm even top 5, which is amazing, but I can't go on those massive kill streaks. My blocks are still a little bit spotty. Ripostes and counters happen just at random, it seems, even though I know sort of how to utilise them, but my strikes back just aren't quick enough. I blame using the controller, that's what I say, and do know how to do all the actions required to do objectives like throwing fire sticks now, which I will be honest is difficult on controller as you have to press the 2 shoulder buttons. I also want to complain about the X button, which is required to pick up weapons, ladders, fire sticks, bombs and down teammates, but unless you are completely standing still and then hold the X button in, you end up emoting, which Dozy Twat thought that was a great idea, eh? Half the time you try to pick someone up and get stuck in the emote menu, meaning you have to press start twice to exit it, which wastes time where you can be hit by the opposition and then die, especially since one great hit or 2 decent hits realistically puts you on the deck. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4, the weapons each have different hit values, strengths and power depending on class, but you don't last long in this game, so whenever you need to do something, you need your controls to be on point, and on console I feel some of the button map choices are a little weird with you not having any option of changing them. What game does that these days? But regardless of all that though, I haven't described what type of game this is, have I? Well, it's a medieval online hack and slash. It can be played in first person or third. I prefer the immersion of first person, but you do get caught out more often than not, and the mission structure is what I would describe as Rush from Battlefield Bad Company 2. You have 2 sides of 32 or 20 depending on the game type you choose, along with the ability to play with bots for beginners, something I've not experienced as I wanted to just jump into 64 players, my preferred mode, as it's more chaotic and you have to either defend or attack a huge variety of maps. Now, your attacking objectives will be anything from pushing siege equipment, bashing down doors, capturing bridges, rescuing prisoners by bashing open cages, setting fire to objects, holding certain points, killing certain people, or planting bombs to blow things up. So the objectives are very varied, and each map will feature 5 points for you to complete one of those objectives in before you move on to the other, opening the map up even more and pushing the defenders ever further back each time. You have about 8 minutes on average to achieve your first objective as attackers, and the quicker you do them each, the more time you get, as you get bonus extension times for the next parts. I think it's somewhere between 5 and 3 minutes is the best from what I've seen, as we had about 9 minutes in total the once for the next objective, but we did blitz the opening objectives and my team were gods amongst men that day, but you always feel like you have just enough time as an attacker to do something, whilst as a defender it always feels like it never blooming ends. You get a decent back and forth going in the main mode, especially as you're not always doing just one thing. I haven't quite understood how public servers work, but it does seem to throw you out of a game and just repopulate you in a brand new one with a fresh new batch of players. I haven't noticed many times where it will be the same people playing alongside or against you again. The top players especially seem to rotate out, but the gameplay loop here is almost perfect. The way the objectives for the attacking rush are varied is always interesting, and the Battlefield maps always change up the style of combat also. Maps will always usually have one of the objectives I listed earlier, but pushing some siege equipment from far away in a massive open battlefield will change up as soon as you've got it close to the walls into this tight corridor style hack and slash game, as like Xenomorphs, the defending team always seem to be coming out of the sodding walls and attacking you from everywhere. Sometimes also the game will push you into a tight combat zone like a bridge or bashing down a door, only to open up into a massive castle courtyard where you have to free prisoners from cages before going back to a mix of close-up mosh pits and further afield one-on-ones. Matches can take anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes depending on how each team is doing with their objectives. One match I had the other night, we only just managed to complete all our objectives just as the clock was hitting 0 to progress on to the next one. It was a brutal back and forth, and I never got bored once, and that's because of the core gameplay loop consistently pushing you onto the battlefield and onto each objective. It's right from the off also, as every respawn or game start sees you uncontrollably charge into the enemy with a bunch of other people. You are never alone. Even during respawns, you have about 5 or 6 people alongside you charging forwards. You don't respawn until there are a group of you dead and ready to go back into the fight, along with respawn locations just being the right distance away from the front line. You're just far enough away that you have about a 15 to 30 second run before you can start slashing at people. So there is this consistent refreshing of the front line and a back and forth between both sides of the conflict as you push further towards completing the objective for that area or defending that objective vigilantly. You're always being pushed in the right direction. The map is sometimes massive and open, with often multiple lanes for attack on both sides. You can stay as part of the pack, or if you're great, you can go at it alone and defend yourself against multiple opponents, consistently blocking and getting your stamina back with the counter mechanics, which means you are causing confusion in the backfield and giving your team openings as the opposition have to spend resources off the front to deal with you. The UI especially is great at telling you what you're doing right. A block drains stamina, so when you block a hit, it doesn't just drain the bar. You get a pop-up in the middle of the screen telling you that you can't keep doing that as your shield goes down lower on every hit, only going up with a perfect counter which flashes blue in the middle of the screen telling you you've timed not just the block perfectly, but you've also pressed the attack they did back at them as it hit your defense, giving you a decent window to attempt to counter hit back and using your stamina as well as giving you the initiative for the combat. It's that initiative which truly makes you a great player compared to everyone else, and I'll admit I'm not quite yet there yet, so I look for other openings in the combat. You see, knowing how swings or strikes work and where they hit mean you can join combats and help out after the opponent has struck. Coming to the side or behind with a stab or well-timed overhead will mean you get a perfect opportunity to hit someone. See, I've discovered this game isn't just about racking up your own personal kill count. You get points for assists also, along with losing points for team strikes. So being precise with your strikes is more important than just blindly charging and slashing. And you get great audio feedback on when you've timed it just right also. I'm partially blind in my left eye, which means I'm mostly going off what I can see with my right one. My vision isn't greatly affected, it's just weaker, so getting great audio feedback really helps with telltale signs as to what's going on, and the audio here is sensational. Every hit is crunchy, every block distinct, footsteps, shouts. You can hear the entire battlefield around you when it's combined with visual tells like players slightly stepping back for a kick, movement of the arms to show which swing they are attempting. You get this full sense of immersion, when you've done the right moves, you know when you've messed up and what you need to learn for next time. This game deserves all the praises everyone can muster for its total gameplay design. In fact, the only weakness of this game is its storytelling, as it bases its whole narrative on your experience. You are a complete blank slate who will die swiftly. You are just a number here. A soldier, a peasant, a villager, a guard. You're never really anyone that important. You're a vessel to defend or capture an area. An insignificant statistic. There will be no songs of your great deeds, so the narrative on the battlefield is often one you create yourself. You remember when you slaughtered 5 men defending a ship, or lobbed 3 heads off on one Danax swing. You remember when you stood on the catapult and got launched onto the rampart. You remember being the first up the ladder to down the flags. You remember how it was you who killed Thrawn with a mighty overhead strike to win the match, or that time you snuck in behind the enemy and stole a load of gold from the market, or how you took down 3 knights as a farmer with a pitchfork, or sat in the church unnoticed until you were able to strike down enemies unbeknownst. You can do a hell of a lot to craft your own tales during the battle. Almost everything in the world is interactive, so you can pick up beers and have a drink, throw barrels or food at your enemy, but I would have liked the story to be more pronounced. There are 3 factions vying for power over 2 different countries. The main action happens on Agatha, I think it's called, but I believe it starts story-wise in Tenosha. Basically, the main story started like 20 odd years ago when the Mason Order won a war with Agatha, claiming the lands and ruling as king. A war which started because of a never-ending crusade where the Agathan king upset the populace. Now 20 years later, the Mason Order start a war against the Tenosians, who want to claim some of their lands back, I believe, and whilst Masons are fighting over there, an uprising happens in Old Agatha. The king's son, I think he is, the young lion they call him, starts his own uprising to usurp the Mason king, and they are trapped in this back and forth as you fight the battles for them. That's as much story as you get realistically, and I had to dig deep to try and find it on Reddit. You don't ever get any cinematics or plot during the game. Yes, there are short cinematics at the start of every fight depending on the side you are. You have a different cutscene explaining what you have to do, told by one of the captains cheering you on. But that's as far as it goes, as you are just meant to be a serf who is only there really to fight the battle. I honestly was wishing for something akin to Titanfall 1, a game where the story happens whilst you're involved in the fight. I'd have loved to hear from the captain more as you push further inwards or go further outwards as defenders. Hearing from the VIPs during the last stand, or having a VIP pop up on the attacker's side during the last push as you try to conquer. I'd like to have the lore be more on the forefront, but I am a lore-heavy guy. I'm pretty sure I'm in the minority with this thought, as this is just a combat game where you go into battle screaming and shouting, slashing at the enemy before you eventually die. This game is pure fun. It's hard to put down as you enjoy charging in and hitting people, seeing things blowing up or heads rolling as a scimitar lobs them off. Every game, even ones that last 40 minutes, never outstay their welcome. I often ended up looking at the clock and going, oh bugger, it's bedtime, as I wanted to go again and again back into the fray. This right here is a Gamepass classic. This is the type of game that's perfect for Game Pass. and I hope it stays for a long time. So give it a try if you've got Game Pass, and please watch this video to hear my thoughts on other games. Thanks for watching.